A Mexican immigrant farmer in rural Texas was working alone in his cornfield when the Virgin Mary appeared to him in brilliant light. She told him to run home immediately. His 8-year-old son was choking on his dinner and only had minutes to live. The October sun was beginning its descent over the endless cornfields of rural Texas when Miguel Rodriguez wiped the sweat from his weathered face and checked his watch. It was 6:47 p.m. and he still had another hour of work before he could head home to his family in their small farmhouse on the outskirts of Corpus Christi. Miguel had been working this same patch of land for 12 years, ever since he'd arrived from Guadalajara with nothing but hope, determination, and a fierce love for his wife Elena and their young son Carlos. The American dream hadn't been easy for the Rodriguez family. Miguel spoke broken English, had no formal education beyond elementary school, and faced the daily challenges that came with being an undocumented immigrant in rural Texas. But he was a man of deep faith, and every morning before heading to the fields, Miguel would kneel before the small shrine in their living room, a simple wooden table holding a framed image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, some plastic flowers, and a votive candle that Elena kept burning continuously. "Virgencita," he would whisper in Spanish, "protect my family today. Give me strength to provide for them." Today had been particularly grueling. The corn harvest was behind schedule due to equipment problems, and Miguel's boss, Mr. Thompson, had made it clear that the crew needed to make up for lost time. Miguel had been working since sunrise with only a brief lunch break, his hands raw from handling the corn stalks, his back aching from the constant bending and lifting. As the golden hour light filtered through the corn rows, Miguel was focused entirely on his work, methodically moving through the field with the mechanical precision of someone who had done this job thousands of times before. The familiar rhythm of his labor, cut, gather, load, move forward, was almost meditative, allowing his mind to wander to thoughts of home. He was thinking about Carlos, his 8-year-old son who had started 3rd grade just 6 weeks earlier. The boy was struggling with English at school, just as Miguel struggled with it at work, but he was bright and curious, always asking questions about everything from why corn grew in rows to how far away the stars were. "Papa," Carlos had said that morning as Miguel prepared to leave for work, "when I grow up, I want to help you in the fields." "No, mijo," Miguel had replied, tousling his son's dark hair. "You're going to study, go to college, become somebody important. The fields are for me, not for you." Elena had been preparing dinner when Miguel left that morning. She worked the evening shift at a local diner, serving coffee and pie to truckers and locals who passed through their small town. It was hard work for little pay, but together, Miguel and Elena managed to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. As Miguel worked through the corn rows, he found himself thinking about the conversation he'd had with Elena the night before. She'd been worried about Carlos, who had been coughing for the past few days. Nothing serious, just a lingering cold that seemed to be going around the school. "Maybe we should take him to the clinic," Elena had suggested. "With what money?" Miguel had replied, not harshly, but with the resigned tone of someone who knew that a doctor's visit could mean choosing between medicine and groceries. "The cough will pass," he had assured her. "Kids get sick. Kids get better. It's normal." Now, as he worked alone in the fading daylight, Miguel felt a familiar pang of guilt about the healthcare they couldn't afford, the opportunities they couldn't provide, the constant worry about money that shadowed every decision they made. It was exactly 7:23 p.m. when everything changed. Miguel was bending over to gather an armload of corn stalks when he became aware of a presence behind him. Not the presence of another person. He would have heard footsteps in the dry corn husks, but something else entirely. A warmth that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once, and a light that was somehow brighter than the setting sun. He straightened slowly and turned around. What he saw would be burned into his memory for the rest of his life. Standing among the corn stalks, about 10 feet away from him, was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She appeared to be young, perhaps in her 20s, with dark skin and long black hair that moved gently in a breeze that Miguel couldn't feel. She wore a blue robe covered with stars, and her hands were pressed together in prayer. But it was her face that took Miguel's breath away. There was such love in her expression, such infinite compassion, that Miguel immediately felt tears spring to his eyes without understanding why. The woman was surrounded by a soft, golden light that seemed to come from within her rather than from any external source. The light was warm and welcoming, nothing like the harsh glare of the work lamps Miguel was used to. It reminded him of the candles in the church back in Guadalajara, where his grandmother used to take him as a child. Miguel's first instinct was to run. This couldn't be happening. He was tired, dehydrated, maybe hallucinating from too much sun and too little water. But his feet seemed rooted to the earth, and something deep in his soul recognized who he was seeing. "Miguel," the woman said, and her voice was like music, like water flowing over smooth stones, like every lullaby his mother had ever sung to him. She was speaking Spanish, but not quite the Spanish he knew. It was older somehow, more formal, but perfectly clear. "Do not be afraid, my son." Miguel's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. He wanted to speak, to ask who she was, to ask if he was losing his mind, but no words would come. The woman smiled, and the expression was so full of maternal love that Miguel felt like a child again, safe and protected in his grandmother's arms. "I am the Mother of God," she said simply. "I am the Virgin of Guadalupe, and I have come because you have been faithful in your prayers." Miguel fell to his knees so hard that he felt the impact through his work pants. His hat fell off his head and rolled away into the cornstalks, but he didn't notice. "Virgencita," he whispered, the word coming out as barely a breath. "Miguel, my son, you must listen carefully. You must go home now. Right now. Do not stop, do not delay. Your son Carlos is in great danger." The words hit Miguel like a physical blow. "Carlos? What's wrong with Carlos?" "He is choking, Miguel. He is at your kitchen table, and he cannot breathe. You have perhaps 10 minutes to reach him before." She paused, her expression filled with maternal sorrow. "Before it is too late." Miguel's world tilted on its axis. Carlos was home, safe with Elena before she left for work. He was supposed to be doing homework, maybe watching cartoons. How could he be choking? But Elena is with him. Miguel began. "Elena left for work 20 minutes ago. Carlos is alone, trying to eat the sandwich she left him. A piece of bread is lodged in his throat. You are the only one who can save him." The Virgin's voice was gentle but urgent, and Miguel felt a terror unlike anything he had ever experienced flooding through his chest. "What do I do? How do I?" "You know what to do, Miguel. You learned when Carlos was a baby, remember? Trust yourself. Trust me. But you must go now." Without another word, Miguel scrambled to his feet and began running toward his truck parked at the edge of the field. Behind him, he heard the Virgin call out, "I will be with you, my son. I will guide your hands." Miguel had never driven so fast in his life. His old Ford pickup, usually reliable but not particularly speedy, seemed to fly over the country roads leading back to town. He ran 2 stop signs and took corners at dangerous speeds, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. As he drove, he found himself praying aloud in Spanish, the words tumbling out of him in a desperate stream. "Virgencita, please, protect my son. Let me get there in time. Give me strength, give me wisdom, help me save him." The drive that usually took 25 minutes took 12. Miguel pulled into his driveway with a screech of brakes and bolted from the truck, leaving the door hanging open and the engine running. He burst through the front door of their small house and immediately heard it. A terrible, desperate gasping sound coming from the kitchen. Carlos was sitting at their small kitchen table, his face purple, his eyes wide with terror and confusion. His small hands were clawing at his throat, and Miguel could see that his son was unable to make any sound except for that horrible, rattling attempt to breathe. "Carlos!" Miguel shouted, rushing to his son's side. Time seemed to slow down as Miguel's training kicked in, not medical training, but the basic first aid he had learned when Carlos was a toddler, after Elena had insisted they take a community class at the local fire station. He got behind Carlos's chair and wrapped his arms around his son's small chest, positioning his hands just below the rib cage. Then he began the Heimlich maneuver, pulling upward and inward with sharp, forceful thrusts. 1 thrust. Nothing. 2 thrusts. Carlos's face was getting darker. 3 thrusts. Still nothing, and Miguel could feel panic beginning to overwhelm him. "Please, Virgencita," he prayed aloud. "Help me. Guide my hands." On the 4th thrust, he felt it. Something dislodged. Carlos suddenly coughed violently, and a chunk of bread flew out of his mouth and across the kitchen table. Immediately, Carlos began gasping for air, great whooping breaths that were the most beautiful sound Miguel had ever heard. The purple color began to fade from his son's face, replaced by the pink flush of returning oxygen. "Papa," Carlos whispered, his voice hoarse and scared. "Papa, I couldn't breathe." Miguel gathered his son into his arms and held him so tightly that Carlos squeaked in protest. Tears were streaming down Miguel's face, and he was shaking so hard he could barely stand. "It's okay, Mijo. It's okay. Papa's here. You're safe now." As he held his son, Miguel looked up toward the kitchen window that faced the direction of the cornfield where he'd been working. For just a moment, he thought he saw a soft golden light in the distance, but when he blinked, it was gone. But the warmth remained. The sense of protective maternal love that had surrounded him in the cornfield was still there, wrapping around both him and Carlos like an invisible embrace. Later that evening, after Elena had come home from work and they had explained what happened, though Miguel left out the part about the apparition, Miguel stood alone in their backyard, looking up at the stars. "Thank you," he whispered to the night sky. "Thank you for saving my son. Thank you for coming to me." He felt no need for a response. The miracle had been enough. But as he turned to go back inside, Miguel could swear he heard, carried on the evening breeze, a voice like music saying, "I am always with you, my son. Always." The days following the miracle in the cornfield changed Miguel Rodriguez in ways he couldn't fully explain to anyone, not even Elena. How could he tell his practical, hard-working wife that the Virgin Mary had appeared to him among the corn stalks? How could he explain that he had seen her face, heard her voice, felt her presence as real as the Texas sun on his back? But the evidence was undeniable. Carlos was alive because Miguel had received a warning that no earthly messenger could have delivered. There was no way Miguel could have known his son was in danger. Elena had left for work at her usual time, Carlos had been fine when she left, and Miguel had been miles away in the fields with no cell phone coverage. Yet somehow, he had known. The Virgin had told him, and he had arrived with just minutes to spare. For the first few days after the incident, Miguel carried the secret alone, turning it over in his mind like a precious stone he was afraid to show anyone else. He continued going to work in the cornfields, but now he found himself pausing frequently, looking around for any sign of the golden light, listening for that voice like music. Elena noticed the change immediately. "Miguel, what's wrong with you?" she asked on the Thursday evening after the choking incident. "You keep staring off into space. Are you worried about Carlos? The doctor said he's fine." They had taken Carlos to the emergency room the night it happened, despite the cost, just to make sure there was no damage to his throat. The ER doctor had been impressed with Miguel's quick thinking. "You probably saved your son's life," Dr. Martinez had told them. "Another few minutes and we might have been looking at permanent brain damage, or worse. It's lucky you came home when you did." Lucky. The word had echoed in Miguel's mind all week. It wasn't luck that had brought him home. It was divine intervention. "I'm fine," Miguel told Elena, but he knew she didn't believe him. After 15 years of marriage, she could read him like one of Carlos's picture books. It was Father O'Sullivan who finally gave Miguel the courage to speak about what had happened. Father O'Sullivan was the Irish priest who served Sacred Heart Catholic Church, the small parish where the Rodriguez family attended Mass every Sunday. He was a kind man in his 60s who had learned fluent Spanish during his 30 years serving Hispanic communities throughout Texas. Miguel had always liked him because he never made the undocumented families feel unwelcome or ashamed. The following Sunday, as Miguel knelt before the statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe after Mass, Father O'Sullivan approached him quietly. "Miguel, my friend, you've been kneeling here for 20 minutes. Is everything all right?" Miguel looked up at the priest's concerned face and felt the words tumble out of him before he could stop them. "Father, I need to tell you something, but you're going to think I'm crazy." Father O'Sullivan smiled gently. "My son, in 40 years of priesthood, I've heard many things that others might consider crazy. Why don't we talk in my office?" 10 minutes later, Miguel found himself sitting across from Father O'Sullivan in the small church office, pouring out the entire story. He told the priest about the apparition in the cornfield, about the Virgin's warning, about racing home to find Carlos choking, about the voice on the evening breeze. Father O'Sullivan listened without interruption, his hands folded, his expression serious but not skeptical. When Miguel finished, the priest was quiet for a long moment. "Miguel," he said finally, "the Catholic Church has a long history of Marian apparitions. Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe itself. The Church doesn't take such claims lightly, but neither do we dismiss them automatically." "You believe me?" "I believe that you believe what you're telling me. And more importantly, I believe that the Virgin Mary loves her children enough to intervene when they're in mortal danger. Your son is alive, Miguel. That's not imagination. That's fact." Father O'Sullivan leaned forward. "But I want you to understand something important. If this truly was an apparition of Our Lady, it wasn't just for you. These experiences are meant to be shared, to strengthen the faith of the entire community." "You want me to tell people?" "I want you to pray about it. Ask Our Lady what she wants you to do with this gift you've received." That night, Miguel knelt before the family shrine in his living room for over an hour. Elena had gone to work, Carlos was asleep, and the house was quiet except for the tick of the kitchen clock and the hum of the refrigerator. "Virgencita," he whispered to the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, "Father O'Sullivan says you might want me to share what happened. But I'm scared. People will think I'm lying, or crazy, or trying to get attention." As he prayed, Miguel felt that familiar warmth surrounding him, and though he saw no vision this time, he heard a voice in his heart, not audible like that day in the cornfield, but unmistakable nonetheless. "Do not be afraid, my son. Your testimony will bring hope to those who have forgotten how much they are loved." The next morning, Miguel asked Elena to sit with him at their kitchen table before Carlos woke up for school. "Elena, I need to tell you something about the day Carlos was choking." Elena set down her coffee cup and looked at him with the expression she got when she was preparing herself for bad news. Miguel told her everything. He expected her to be skeptical, maybe even angry that he hadn't told her sooner. Instead, Elena listened with growing wonder, occasionally reaching out to touch his hand. When he finished, Elena was quiet for a long time, staring down at her coffee. "Miguel," she said finally, "you remember what happened when my mother was dying? When we couldn't afford to fly to Mexico to say goodbye?" Miguel nodded. Elena's mother had passed away suddenly 3 years earlier, and they hadn't had the money for plane tickets to Guadalajara for the funeral. That night, I dreamed about her. She was standing in our bedroom, wearing her blue dress, the one she wore to church every Sunday. She told me she wasn't in pain anymore, and that she was proud of me for the life we'd built here. When I woke up, I felt such peace. Elena looked up at Miguel with tears in her eyes. "I never told you that because I thought you'd say it was just a dream. But it felt real, Miguel. More real than anything. Do you think I'm crazy?" "I think," Elena said slowly, "that we forget sometimes that God still works miracles. We get so worried about paying bills and fixing the truck and Carlos's cough that we forget that we serve a God who loves us enough to send his mother to warn us when our child is in danger." That afternoon, Elena called in sick to work, something she had never done unless she was genuinely ill, and the three of them drove to Sacred Heart Church. Father O'Sullivan met them in the sanctuary, where Miguel knelt before the statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe and told his story again, this time with his wife and son listening. Carlos, who was 8 years old and still processing what had happened to him, asked the question that had been troubling him all week. "Papa, why didn't I see the lady? If she came to save me, why didn't she appear to me?" Father O'Sullivan knelt down to Carlos's eye level. "Sometimes, Mijo, God works through other people to help us. Your papa was working in the field, far from home, but Our Lady knew that he would drop everything to save you. She chose him to be her messenger. Like the angel who talked to Mary when Jesus was born?" Exactly like that. Word of Miguel's experience spread through the Hispanic community faster than he had expected. Elena mentioned it to her coworker at the diner, who told her neighbor, who told her sister-in-law, who told everyone at her son's soccer game. Within 2 weeks, people were approaching Miguel after Sunday Mass to ask him to tell the story again. Some were skeptical, others were deeply moved, but everyone wanted to hear about the day the Virgin Mary appeared in a Texas cornfield. Maria Santos, an elderly woman whose grandson had been killed in a car accident the previous year, wept openly when Miguel finished his account. "I needed to hear this," she told him. "I've been so angry at God, so lost since Roberto died. But if Our Lady is still looking after us, still protecting our children, maybe there's hope." Father O'Sullivan suggested that Miguel share his testimony during the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe in December. The idea terrified Miguel, standing up in front of the entire congregation, telling his story to hundreds of people, but Elena encouraged him. "God gave you this experience for a reason, Miguel. Maybe this is the reason." December 12th, the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, was always a big celebration at Sacred Heart Church. The sanctuary was decorated with roses, mariachi music filled the air, and families came from miles around to honor the patroness of Mexico and the Americas. When Father O'Sullivan introduced Miguel and asked him to share his testimony, Miguel's hands were shaking so badly he had to grip the podium to steady himself. "I'm not good at speaking in front of people," he began in Spanish, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a farm worker. I only went to school until I was 12 years old. But I want to tell you about something that happened to me that changed my life forever." As Miguel told his story, the apparition in the cornfield, the desperate race home, the miracle of Carlos's rescue, the sanctuary fell completely silent. Even the babies seemed to sense the gravity of what they were hearing. When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. But it was what happened next that convinced Miguel that his experience truly had been meant for more than just his family. After the Mass, a young mother named Carmen approached him, carrying a toddler who couldn't have been more than 2 years old. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said in broken English, "your story, it gives me hope. My daughter, she has leukemia. The doctors say." Carmen's voice broke. "They say there's not much more they can do. But if Our Lady is still watching over us, still protecting our children, maybe she'll help my baby too." Miguel looked down at the little girl, who was thin and pale from chemotherapy but who smiled at him with bright, curious eyes. "What's her name?" "Esperanza. It means hope." Miguel reached out and gently touched the child's tiny hand. "Esperanza, what a beautiful name. You know what? I'm going to pray to Our Lady of Guadalupe for you every single day. And I want you to know that she loves you very much." Over the following months, Miguel began visiting families in crisis throughout the community. Word had spread about the farm worker who had received a vision from the Virgin Mary, and people sought him out when they needed someone to pray with them, to remind them that God still cared about their struggles. Miguel never charged money or asked for anything in return. He simply shared his story and offered to pray with anyone who wanted prayer. Little Esperanza's leukemia went into remission 3 months after Miguel met her. The doctors called it unexpected but not impossible. Carmen called it a miracle. Whether it was divine intervention or simply the natural course of the disease, Miguel knew that his encounter with Our Lady in the cornfield had given Esperanza's family something invaluable: hope. 2 years later, Carlos Rodriguez, now 10 years old and completely healthy, often accompanied his father on these visits to families in need. "Papa," he asked one evening as they drove home from praying with a family whose house had been destroyed in a fire, "do you think Our Lady will ever appear to you again?" Miguel considered the question carefully. "I don't know, Mijo. But you know what? I don't think it matters. She told me she would always be with us, and I believe her. I feel her presence every day, when I'm working in the fields, when I'm praying with families who are hurting, when I tuck you into bed at night. Do you think she'll appear to me someday? Maybe she will. Or maybe she'll work through you in a different way. The important thing is to keep your heart open and to remember that we are never alone." Today, Miguel Rodriguez still works in the cornfields outside Corpus Christi, but his life has expanded far beyond the boundaries of those rows. He serves as an unofficial chaplain to the Hispanic community, visiting hospitals, praying with families, and sharing his testimony of hope wherever he's invited. Sacred Heart Church has placed a small plaque in the spot where Miguel knelt to pray after first sharing his story. It reads, "In memory of the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe to Miguel Rodriguez, October 15, 2019. I am always with you, my children." Carlos Rodriguez, now in middle school, has never forgotten the day he almost died or the miraculous chain of events that saved his life. He carries with him the knowledge that his father was chosen by the Mother of God to be an instrument of salvation, and that legacy has shaped him into a young man of deep faith and compassion. And sometimes, when Miguel is working alone in the cornfields at sunset, he pauses in his labor and looks around at the golden light filtering through the stalks. He doesn't see visions anymore, but he feels that familiar warmth, that sense of protective, maternal love watching over him and his family. Because some encounters with the divine are so powerful that they continue to radiate grace long after the initial moment has passed. Some messages from heaven are meant not just for the person who receives them, but for entire communities who need to be reminded that miracles still happen, that prayers are still answered, and that a mother's love, whether earthly or heavenly, knows no limits. Miguel Rodriguez learned that truth in a Texas cornfield, and he has spent every day since then sharing that truth with anyone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes salvation comes through the most ordinary of messengers: a farm worker, a father, a man of simple faith who was willing to believe that the impossible was not only possible, but was standing right in front of him, surrounded by golden light, calling his name. And there you have it, This incredible story of divine intervention and maternal protection touched your heart, didn't it? Miguel proved that when the Virgin Mary needs to save one of her children, she'll appear anywhere, even in a Texas cornfield, to make sure no mother loses her child, right? If you were moved by this real testimony of how Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared to a Mexican immigrant farmer in the cornfields and warned him that his 8-year-old son was choking at home, giving him just enough time to race back and save his boy's life, hit that like button below. It really helps me continue sharing these stories that show Mary's protective love for families everywhere. If you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and hit that notification bell. Every week there's a new testimony that will renew your faith that the Virgin Mary is always watching over us, especially in our most desperate moments. And don't forget to check out our store in the first pinned comment. We have amazing Christian products, including the 365-day devotional, perfect for strengthening your relationship with Jesus and understanding Mary's role as our protective mother. Tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced divine intervention in a life-threatening situation? Do you believe the Virgin Mary still appears to ordinary people today? And if you also trust in Mary's protective love for families, right, Mary protects her children, declare your faith in her maternal care. Share this video with parents, with immigrant families, with anyone who needs to know that the Virgin Mary crosses all boundaries to protect the children she loves, no matter where they come from or what language they speak. Thanks for watching until the end. May Our Lady of Guadalupe bless your family and keep all your children safe in her maternal embrace. See you in the next testimony.